Rose on Wednesday before keenly awaited trade talks between China and the United States, while early worries over a double whammy for U.S. President Donald Trump also eased. While not expecting a major deal when officials from Beijing and Washington meet, investors are hopeful they can find a way out of the months-long row that's seen tariffs imposed on billions of dollars of goods and stock market tumble. Tokyo's Nikkei gained 0.6%, while the Hang Seng was 50 basis points up, and the Shanghai Composite Index was 0.7% to the good, ending the day at 2,714 points. U.S. stocks were full steam ahead last night, with the benchmark S&P 500 touching a record high on Tuesday and equaled its longest ever bull market run. U.S. stocks rose on encouraging earnings reports in the consumer sector and relative calm in the ongoing trade war between the United States and China. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 0.25%, the S&P 500 gained 0.2%, and the Nasdaq Composite Index added 0.5%. For more on the markets, we cross to Arabile Gumede. He's at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Good afternoon, Arabile. What's happening in the markets today?
Yeah, good afternoon, Nzinga. Well, it is green all across the board. Decided to match with the markets. Why not? 1 1/3% to the good is how the market is sitting, particularly the old share, amid, of course, an earnings season, which seems to have culminated in a little more quiet today, although 3 companies did also report. The Rand is faring a whole lot better as well, at around 14.31 against the US dollar. So a lot happening when it comes to the markets for now. But with that, let's unpack the remainder of the European and local markets. As you can tell, the market picture in itself, pretty green across the board. Maudi Lenzwana from Lehomo Capital joining us as we unpack that market movement and perhaps some earnings news, some economic news as well coming out. It's a green tinge today. Let's talk about what that's about. Where does that come from?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think for the larger part of this week, it's been a very, very decent trading session that we saw from Monday. The dust seems to have settled, Arabile, from, very, very volatile week that we had last week.
Yeah.
I think there's less noise around whether the issues are around Turkey and also the trade war. I know that China and the US are currently engaging in the discussions around the trade. So this could be short-lived, but I think for the time being, we are certainly seeing the environment, which is a little bit settled, and I think allowing for these markets to really perform the way they've performed for this week. So the dust has settled. For how long? It's anyone's guess.
I mean, that was going to be my next question. Turkey is, of course, sort of away this week because of religious festivities. Yeah. Next week they come back online, and perhaps that contagion isn't now in effect, and things come back to bite us. Do you think that could be a case as well next week?
No, certainly. I mean, I think if in the case of Turkey, you just look at the sort of actions that they've taken to try and deal with the crisis that they have. They've absolutely done nothing to try and. They've done nothing decisive to try and, to try and deal with the situation that they have. So if we do get a bit of an escalation, particularly from the US as well, we could actually see the sell-off return and more volatility come back into the emerging markets space. So for the time being, it is a break. And as you said, because they are on holiday and simply because there hasn't been any new news coming through to try and change the current status quo.
Yeah. At the same time, it's been a heavy earnings week, as we've spoken about a lot, either it be Imperial or ShopRite or Standard Bank. All of that has sort of seen the market still, however, go into the green, following, of course, a fall by Naspers even last week as well. Yeah. But this week seems to be a better week. What does that say about this earnings season in particular, which isn't over yet, but certainly is looking good, isn't it?
Yeah. Look, so far, I would probably say a bit of a mixed bag, because there's certainly some companies that have surprised on the downside, the likes of ShopRite, for example. Yesterday, but there has been some, some companies that have continued to hold above the water. Understandably, the economy is under a lot of pressure. So therefore, there's not much expectations for these companies to really overshoot to the upside. I mean, you look at the likes of Imperial yesterday, managing to release their good results. When you look at Blue Label today, good numbers, but when you look at the impact of what SABC is doing to them, it's certainly not looking good. But in general, I think we've done fairly okay in certain sectors, but certainly we are bleeding in some of the sectors. I mean, I think when you look into the retail space, we look at the gold space, there's certainly a lot of damage that has been done. And this is a story of an economy that is not doing so well. The companies that are doing fairly well are the companies which have got exposure into the offshore markets. Those are the ones that seems to be performing a lot better than the South African Inc. South African Inc. is under a lot of pressure.
We'll talk about South Africa Inc., particularly when it comes to economy, but you speak of offshore, and of course the rand comes into play. There's the figure exactly there, 14.26 at present against the US dollar, moving in the right direction. But again, that Turkey effect next week could come into play.
Look, I think that the range remains. We remain very much under threat for that 15 rand. At the moment, we are in the midpoint of that 15 and 14, and I think that's where we're going to play for the rest of the week, for as long as there isn't any new negative news that comes through. So we could actually remain around these levels for some time, which is not bad for us.
Yeah, taking all of that into account, the rand is performing this well, and that's despite inflation peaking above 5% for the first time in a couple of months, 5.1%.
Yeah, at a 10-month high, it's inflation. Look, we were expecting a little bit of an increase, given just the number of things that have happened. We've had those, the fuel price increases over the past couple of months. We've also had, the VAT. The VAT is still adding pressure into that. But what continues to be the benefit, especially for the South African consumer, is the inflation on the food basket. That has continued to really moderate. Mostly
because the drought also has now dissipated somewhat.
That is correct.
Right?
I mean, I think you saw it in the numbers yesterday of Shoprite, where they're saying the numbers are not so good simply because there's no inflation into that. And I think this will continue to be a benefit for the consumer, South African consumer. However, if we continue to see the rand weakness, that picture could actually end up changing. The rand weakness is what put a lot of pressure on that particular inflation. But for the time being, it looks to be well anchored.
You speak about that inflation, particularly for Shoprite as well. In their numbers, they speak of a 0.5% inflation rate on their prices. I mean, that is almost negligible when in regards to how much consumers are generally paying. They were able to even increase the number of shops and increase the number of employees. So on the whole, on that front, they seem to have added sort of to people's well-being in some way, despite the numbers looking, the way they did.
Look, they don't have a choice, do they? Because you can't increase prices in this environment. You simply will not be able to generate the sales volumes that you expect to generate. So they are forced to increase it at the rate that they're increasing. It's not that it's an option for them, but it speaks of the economy that's under a lot of pressure.
Very quickly as well, next month is the time when it happens, but does this apply more pressure to the South African Reserve Bank to hike rates, you think?
I think confirmed we are certainly in a hiking period. However, I think they'll probably do a wait and see in the next meeting. So it all depends on what happens with the rand in particular. How much weakness do we get? And if we get a lot of weakness in the rand, then we're certainly going to see an increase going forward.
Around the 22nd of September is when the South African Reserve Bank will be meeting to unpack exactly where they see inflation in the country and whether they will increase interest rates or keep them as they stand. As I said, a green tinge to the market today. Even the resources are up 1.25%. Financials also up over 1%. A good day all around, including for Bitcoin going up nearly 3% today. That's a look at your markets. That was Maudi Lenzwana from Lihumo Capital as well, unpacking the markets for us. Nompumelelo Nzinga joining you right after this. Do stay.